Hey everyone! So today we are diving deep into one of biology's most fundamental questions. How does life actually determine sex? Now, you might think you know the answer, XX, XY, done. But as we're about to see, nature's playbook is way more creative and honestly a lot weirder than you can possibly imagine.
So let's just start with that big question. Male or female? How does life really decide? Is it just a simple genetic coin toss right at conception? A blueprint that's set in stone? Or is there something else going on? Well, the crazy thing is, the answer is, yeah, it's all of those and a whole lot more.
For most of us, our understanding of sex determination pretty much begins and ends with what we learned in high school biology, right? XX means you're female, XY means you're male. But that, it turns out, is like reading the first page of a massive book and thinking you know the whole story. Today, we're going to flip through some of the other wilder chapters.
Okay, first things first. Let's get our terms straight so we're all on the same page. When we say sex determination, we're talking about the biological system that literally kicks off the development of sexual characteristics. Think of it like the very first switch that gets flipped, sending an organism down one developmental path instead of another.
So the most familiar way this all happens is, of course, genetic. It's written right there in the chromosomes. But even here, in this supposedly simple system, there are some pretty surprising variations. And to really get it, we need to know two key terms.
Right. An organism is called homogametic if it has two of the same sex chromosome. Think XX in human females. And it's heterogametic if it has two different ones, like XY in human males. Now remember those terms, because as you're about to see, who gets to be the heterogametic one? Well, it isn't always who you'd think.
And this is where it starts to get really interesting. Look, in our familiar XY system, the male is heterogametic. He's got the different chromosomes. But check out birds and butterflies. They use something called the ZW system. And in their case, it's the female who carries two different chromosomes, Z and W. And then you get something like grasshoppers and crickets, where the male is just XO. Now that 0 isn't a typo. It literally means they are missing an entire sex chromosome.
Okay, so now let's zoom in on a classic example that scientists have studied for over a century, the common fruit fly. It uses an XY system just like we do. But, and this is a big but, the actual mechanics of how it works are completely different. Here is the absolute key difference. In humans, there's a gene on the Y chromosome called SRY. That's basically the master switch for maleness. But in fruit flies, the Y chromosome has almost nothing to do with determining sex. It's mostly just there for sperm to work properly. Instead, for the fly, it all comes down to a simple count. How many X chromosomes do you have? If you have one X, you develop as a male. If you have two X's, you develop as a female. It's purely a numbers game.
So how does the fly's body count those chromosomes? Well, it uses this beautiful molecular domino effect, what biologists call a genetic cascade. Now, I know this diagram looks a little intimidating, but it all starts with one single master switch gene, which has the amazing name sex-lethal, or SXL for short. Let's break down how that works.
Okay, so think of it like this. If an embryo has two X chromosomes, that's a strong enough signal to flip that SXL master switch to on. The SXL protein then gets made, and its job is to turn on the next gene in the chain, called transformer. Then the transformer protein tells the final gene, double sex, how to behave. In females, this double sex protein acts like a construction foreman, basically giving the orders to build a female body. But in males, with only one X, that SXL switch never gets turned on, and the whole chain of events flows in a different direction, building a male body by default.
And this whole process shows a really fundamental difference between us and flies. In humans, our gonads produce hormones, and those hormones travel through the body and tell all our other cells what sex they should be. But in flies, this genetic cascade we just talked about happens independently inside every single cell. As these famous geneticists pointed out over 100 years ago, each cell makes its own decision. And this is why you can get something absolutely wild, like a fly that is perfectly female on one half of its body and perfectly male on the other, split right down the middle.
And here's a peek at what that looks like at the molecular starting line. Don't worry about all the technical stuff on the slide. Here's the only thing you need to know. Look at the left. In a female, the XX embryo sends a strong enough signal to turn on that SXL master switch. That kicks off the whole female cascade. Now look at the right. In a male, the single X just doesn't provide enough of a signal. The switch stays off, no protein gets made, and the cell goes down the default male path. It all comes down to that very first step.
Okay, we've been deep in the world of genes and chromosomes, calling all the shots.
But what if I told you that for a whole bunch of species, the answer isn't in their DNA at all? For them, their sex is determined by the world around them.
Yep, you heard that right. For a lot of reptiles, the sex of their babies is determined not by which chromosomes they get, but by how warm the nest is while they're developing. It's literally in the weather. And get this, there isn't just one rule. For most turtles, cool nests make boys and warm nests make girls. But then you look at the tuatara, a unique reptile from New Zealand, and it's the complete opposite. Cool nests make females. And then you have my personal favorite, the crocodilians. For them, the extreme temperatures, both cool and warm, make females. Only the nests with those nice, middle-of-the-road temperatures produce males. It's just an incredible display of nature's flexibility.
And just when you think it can't get any stranger, it does. Meet this marine worm. For this little guy, it is all about location, location, location. If a free-swimming larva happens to settle down on the empty seafloor, it grows up to become a large female. But if that exact same larva happens to land on an existing female, it gets absorbed into her body and develops into a tiny, parasitic male whose only job in life is to make sperm for her. I mean, talk about your life path being determined by where you land.
So we've seen chromosomes, we've seen the environment, but believe it or not, nature still has a few more really wild recipes up its sleeve for determining sex. Take bees and ants. For them, it's just a simple matter of fertilization. The queen can actually choose whether or not to fertilize an egg as she lays it. If the egg gets fertilized, it has a full set of chromosomes and grows into a female, either a worker or a new queen. But if she leaves it unfertilized, it only has half the chromosomes, and it develops into a male drone. Simple as that. But if you thought all of that was strange, nature has definitely saved the best and weirdest for last. Let's talk for a moment about one of the most wonderfully bizarre animals on the entire planet, the platypus.
No, that is not a typo. The platypus doesn't have 2 sex chromosomes like us. It has 10. Males have this bizarre chain of 5 X's and 5 Y chromosomes, while females have 10 X chromosomes. It's this incredibly complex system that's part mammal, part bird-like, and just 100% unique. So from a chromosomal coin flip to the temperature of the sand to where a larva happens to land, all the way to a 10-chromosome chain, we've seen that nature absolutely does not rely on a single blueprint. The diversity is just staggering. And it kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? If biology itself is this flexible and creative, well, maybe our own definitions should be too.